Okay, now we're live. All right. Good evening, everyone. This is Chris Johnson again, the chairman of the Finance and Economic Development Committee. We are running a little bit behind schedule for those folks at home, but no worries. We are in it for the long haul. So we're gonna hopefully make up some time on the schedule. But we have a set schedule, but it is important that we have time to discuss these issues. So, we are here for how long it takes. So without further ado, up next is the Treasurer's Office. I believe we have the City Treasurer, Dwayne Sims, and I believe his deputy, Alfred Lance, is also present. So the floor is yours, Treasurer Sims.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. How are you?
Mr. Chair, can we please take a attendance, please?
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry about that. All right. Let me just pull up our list. All right. So do we have and who from the do we have Vice Chair Harley present?
Present.
Councilmember Oliver. Councilmember Walsh.
Here.
All right. Councilmember Field.
Present.
Councilmember Spadola.
Here.
Council President Congo.
Here.
Okay. And also, do we have in attendance Councilmember Dixon? Councilmember Cabrera? Councilmember Fields?
Present.
Councilmember Darby? Councilmember Gray? And Councilmember McCoy. All right, well, it does look like we do have enough for a quorum, so that is satisfied. And as council members do stream back in, just please again either let me or Ms. Marshall Bassnight know that you're here and would like to be recognized. All right, so at this time we are now ready to dive into the Treasurer's Office committee hearing, budget hearing, and if you would like to do a brief introduction. Treasurer Sims, before we begin the questioning.
Yes, Mr. Chair, can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Excellent, wonderful. Just want to make sure that I'm coming through from this headset loud and clear. Good evening to all the council members, Madam Vice Chair, of course, Councilman Johnson is the chair. You'll have in front of you our budget hearing presentation, which I know we'll move
I have to
through.
go first.
And I believe, though, as we look at the first two slides of the presentation, I know we have Director Greco and our analyst from OMB, Mr. George Hayford, as well here to present with us. I do believe they may be speaking to the very first two slides.
Yes, and that's what I was going to do.
Yes.
Okay,
So,
excellent.
Yeah, I was going to do your brief introduction. If you had any brief introduction, then kick it to B, and then we'll start the questioning. So,
I'll be happy to do so. Yes, I do actually. I can tell you. Well, again, first and foremost, good evening. It's our pleasure to be able to present in front of the full council this evening. Of course, with respect to time, we'll try to make sure that we do have a good amount of information that we want to share with you all and the public, of course. But we will do our very best to be cognizant of the time and try to help you, Mr. Chair, make up some time here as you move through what I'm sure is going to be a long evening. Let me just say that first and foremost, I want to thank my staff. I've got a wonderful staff. I'm fortunate, and by nature of me having a wonderful staff, the city is in great hands as well. They've been very helpful, as you might imagine, in pulling this together. And of course, I want to thank, of course, our internal and external partners in helping bring this together. There's three goals of this presentation. I think you'll see that we really hope to accomplish. One, hopefully it'll be evident the spirit of collaboration that I just spoke to. Secondly, hopefully it's noticed the time and hopefully the amount of attention that we've paid to making sure that we bring a level of information and transparency to our presentation. And then, as always the case when we present from this office, we hope that you'll leave with a better understanding and more information than what you began with. It's been an interesting and dynamic first 100 days for our administration. The 100-day actually mark is next week, Friday. And of course, as you might imagine, we had some really clear goals coming in. Deputy Treasurer Lance and I, first and foremost being to get an understanding of the complete operations and grab a hold of the office, as you might imagine. Secondarily, continuity of business, right? At the end of the day, this is heavy operations and treasury operations, and we wanted to make sure that business was moving as we stepped onto the train, if you will, and we wanted to make sure that the train didn't miss any stops and had no mishaps, and I'm happy to say so far so good. Third, we wanted to make sure that we opened up any new lines of communication. I'm talking about with our advisors, any vendors, and of course our internal and external partners. Of course, budget presentation. So we're just over 3 months into our time in administration now, and of course, budget has been on my mind probably since November 15th of 2020. And then, of course, last but not least, and we'll expound on this a little bit later, preliminary assessments of the office operations, which we'll expound on in just a few. So, with no further ado, back to that spirit of collaboration that I mentioned at the outset, our Director Greco, and of course, one of the best analysts out here, Mr. George Hayford. I'll yield to them for the very first 2 slides, and then you'll see a back and forth, if you will, again, in the spirit of collaboration between Deputy Treasurer and I, Lance and I, as we present to you this evening. Director Greco, please go right ahead.
I will turn it over to George Hayford, the analyst.
Thank you all. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Council President, and honorable members of City Council. I would like to present the Treasurer's Office FY2022 proposed budget request on behalf of Office of Management and Budget. Funding for the Treasurer's Office is derived from the General Fund and all the pension funds. The pension funds represent over 93% or $5.7 million. And the General Fund is less than 7% or $449,000 of the total budget. The department budget request is over $6.2 million, which represents 2.2% or $143,000 over the FY2021 budget. Personal services across all funds decreased in total by $57,800, while regular salaries across all funds rose by $8,100 due to an increase of treasury salary as well as employee anniversary step increases and a proposed 2% COLA for non-appointed positions. Pension costs for employees in the department decreased by $24,200 due to the retirement of previous deputy director who was in the higher cost city pension plan. Temporary salaries funding was eliminated in all funds, leading to a reduction of $39,000 in personal services. However, of that amount, $18,000 was moved to temporary agencies in MSNE to hire a temporary worker to cover the duties of the vacant pension coordinator. Travel decreased by $14,000 in recognition that the number and location of conferences will continue to be limited due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The yearly self-insurance target for the retiree medical costs in the pension healthcare fund was increased by $250,000, bringing the total funding for the program to $4.25 million for FY2022. This increase affected all departments. This concludes my presentation of the Treasurer's Office 2022 proposed budget. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hayford. Now I'd like to move back to either Treasurer Sims or Deputy Treasurer Lance to get into the questions. All right.
Yes, sir.
Are you ready? All right.
I am.
So if WITN can pull the slide up, I want to start with question number 1. It's the same question we're asking every department
Sure.
nowadays. Considering the COVID-19 pandemic, can you discuss any budgetary account lines that were directly impacted in which you had CARES Act reimbursements?
Yes, sir. Quick question, Mr. Chair. I know there was a slide with respect to departmental priorities as well. Did we
Okay.
want to, should we address that very quickly
Yes,
before
yes, you
jumping
can
in?
cover that. Yes.
Is that all right? Okay, excellent. I think
Cover that
it
first
should
and then
be
dive
just
into
before
question.
this slide here. So if the moderator can move to the previous slide. Excellent. Thank you very much. So I'll be very quick with these. I think, again, back into the spirit of transparency, when we speak about departmental priorities, we were a lot of thought into this. I won't read this to you. I've highlighted in blue those phrases that I think are really most pertinent under each section. But just know that underneath governance, we're looking at obviously cultivating and reinforcing, a strong compliance and sound stewardship culture. And of course, we want 100% compliance with all statutes and regulations. I mean, anything else, quite candidly, is just not acceptable. And we do that leveraging our relationships with internal, external auditors and our partners as well throughout the city. Modernization is a key priority for our office as well. We've been fortunate in this, the city has been fortunate to have such stable leadership for a significant period of time in the Treasury Department. And so what we'd like to do is make sure we're coming in, doing a thorough overview. Myself, the Deputy Treasurer, and working with partners. I'll get into this a little bit later, but the key here is to update internal policies and controls. And of course, the end game with respect to modernization is really to position the Treasurer's office and thereby the city of Wilmington and its citizens, to capitalize on any future opportunities, both in the near and long term. Efficiency, at the end of the day, you'll hear me mention this as oftentimes it is an operation. This is a business. And so evaluating internal operations, our procedures, our processes, and making enhancements to drive essentially what are optimal results. You'll see later in our presentation that we plan on utilizing the consultant's budget line item to work with external partners that we identify to really bring all of these things to fruition. Last but not least is outreach. And of course, we want to promote an enhanced community-wide financial literacy and education for not just the city employees, but for the greater Wilmington community. And we'll need to identify partnerships throughout the city to accomplish that. And again, the emphasis there is community-wide, citywide. So those are really the 4 pillars of the priorities that we're looking to do, not just for this budget, but quite candidly to be hallmarked throughout my administration over the next 4 years. All right.
Thank you, Treasurer Sims.
My pleasure.
Now,
We can move
I
on
believe
to.
we can jump into question 1, which deals with the original CARES Act reimbursements.
That's correct. We're fortunate. The Treasurer's Office has not had any budget lines, account lines that were adversely impacted in fiscal year 2021, and we do not anticipate, by nature of just the way we're structured through our budget, to have any issues in fiscal year 2022 either.
All right, so let's move to question 2. In anticipation of the $55 million American Rescue Plan funds, can you discuss the preliminary investment strategy for those funds?
Sure. So two-pronged answer to that question. The first is you heard the council heard in the previous presentation by Chief of Staff referencing the Mayor's Committee working around the American Rescue Funds and its proper use and working with the consultant, et cetera. There's also a select group of individuals from throughout the administration and in office tasked with reviewing and making recommendations in conjunction with that representative that they choose to hire. So just know that I'll be on that committee. We'll be looking at that as we do anticipate the first round of funding to really come through, quite candidly, at any day. There's no telling when it will. We haven't received any specific guidance on when it will arrive, but we do know through the legislation and through the act that it's supposed to come within a fixed time frame of the legislation being approved. Specifically, though, with respect to the investment strategy, you'll hear me talk about, or myself or Deputy Treasurer Lance talk about our investment strategy in general. It's too early at this point to determine the relevance of a possible investment strategy. Why is that the case? Simply put, there's going to be some guidance that and I think you heard Chief of Staff Washington mention this, there'll be guidance that comes from the federal government really on not just how we can use those funds, but exactly, making sure that we're in compliance with any other statutory requirements. Investments fall into that category as well. So although we have an existing strategy on how we manage cash, for example, which we'll touch on, the jury, if we will, is still out on exactly what we'll be able to do. And you mentioned it in the question, actually. There'll be 2 installments, and then we know that these funds, that we don't anticipate anyway, that they'll be instantly expended. So as we receive more guidance, we'll be sure to obviously leverage the cash in an efficient manner and really put it to use within the regulatory and the statutory guideline.
Okay, all right. And thank you very much, Treasurer Sims. And I also, looking at the screen, I would like to recognize Councilmember Dixon, Councilmember Oliver, and Councilmember Cabrera, who are now have joined us. Let's move to, and again, I appreciate the rundown, City Treasurer, as I know we're going to be receiving updates. So as updates happen, can you report back to Finance Committee once we receive federal guidance?
Happy to do so, indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right.
And as we move to the next 3 questions, 3, 4, and 5, Deputy Treasurer Lance will address these, and I'll come back and revisit, pick up on question 6.
All right, perfect. So this goes to you, Deputy Treasurer Lance. Question number 3, can you discuss the vacant position and what your plans are with that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Currently, the only vacant position in the office is our pension manager position. And that's been mentioned before by our analyst, Mr. Hayford. And currently that position is being held vacant as we perform an assessment of the operations of the office. Treasurer Sims has already referred to this, that we are looking into the operations and the efficacy of the office overall. And before we make any decisions with regard to the staffing for that position, we'd like to conclude that assessment, which will be completed by the end of calendar year 2021.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And now I'd like to turn to question number 4. Can you discuss any proposed changes to positions? I guess it dovetails from the last question. So what are your plans to possibly tweak?
That's correct. We are still conducting the assessment, and at this time, there are no changes proposed to the positions within the office.
Okay, and at this time, as a housekeeping matter, I would like to recognize Councilmember Gray, who has joined us. And I believe there are some questions from the council members. So let's start with Councilmember Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a quick question. Is just so I make sure I'm clear. In our budget book, it says that there's a vacant pension coordinator position. Is that the same as the pension manager position that was talked about? I just wanted to make sure it's the same position.
Yes, that is the same position.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then Councilmember Darby.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There actually is a proposed change for the Treasurer's Office. So it asks here in the question, new positions, deleted positions, upgrade, downgrade, title change, and salary changes. So there's a salary change for the city treasurer. And that is a total of a salary increase of $5,788, benefits increase of $836, which is a total of $6,624. And I assume you're going to give me the same answer to why that increase is happening. And you explained it earlier with the mayor. I just don't think it's a time for these positions to be having increases in the middle of COVID. And there's families in Wilmington who are suffering right now. I don't think it's a good idea to have a total of $13,484 between the treasurer and mayor for an increase in their salary.
And if you would like Treasurer Sims or Deputy Treasurer, if you have a
Sure,
comment.
I'll be happy to speak to it. I'll speak to the treasurer's salary, of course. I won't speak on behalf of the mayor. I'm sure certain Chief of Staff Tanya Washington addressed that. What you see here, and first and foremost, forgive the, I won't say oversight, but I know that our analysts addressed this as part of the overview on the first two slides, in mentioning the changes to the overall budget. But what you see there are really actually retroactive, Councilwoman Darby, retroactive for the last 3 years, actually bringing it up to what the current pay salary should be. So although I definitely hear you loud and clear and share your concerns, clearly, I mean, I live in the city and a resident of the city for some time. And so I understand exactly what's happening. But I just wanted to make sure for clarification purposes, we understand it's not necessarily a pay increase related to year over year, but these were actually retroactive changes, just for clarification purposes, going back actually for the last 3 COLA increases that were performed across city positions.
May I follow up, Chair?
Yes, please.
Yes, I just want to say for the record again, is this just a tradition, something that's just done, or is this on the books like this has to be done? Or is this something that's, oh, we just do it because it's nice to do?
Well, I don't know if I'd categorize it as either, quite candidly, but to answer your question, they are retroactive payments brought forward to whomever may have come into this office at this particular time.
Yes, may I follow up, Chair?
Yes, yes, you may.
So again, it's not required that this happen. This is just a tradition that you guys have done years after years of just doing things. And this does not have to be done this year.
I'm sorry, was that a question?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be done. This is in law that if COLA increases happen throughout the years, or that it has to increase, that your salary has to increase.
I'm not certain of the exact language, Councilwoman Darby, but I do know that that's it's standard practice. Yes.
Yeah, standard practice that is not in law. That's just a practice that is just done because that's just what practice is. Like, it's not written in stone. There's no law. It is just something that you guys just do, and you want to continue to do it during a year of a pandemic with people out of jobs, can't afford Wi-Fi, and all the other issues in our city. But okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So let's move to question number 5 on the screen, if you may. Discuss the self-insurance funding target for retiree medical costs, budgeted at $4.2 million. And this is up $250,000 over last year's budget.
Yes, as our analyst, Mr. Hayford mentioned, the $250,000 increase to OPEB, other post-employment benefits, is increased $250,000 this year and drives the overall increase in the treasurer's budget for this year. The reason for that increase is a funding policy that was established back in 2010 that at the direction of our auditors and our advisors, in order to consider this aspect of our pension program fully funded, the city was required to make an additional $250,000 annual contribution to the OPEB program. And as you will see historically, we have done that for the past several years. So year over year, there has been a $250,000 increase just to make sure that the city is considered compliant and fully funded with this aspect of our pension program.
Okay, thank you. And WITN, is that a new hand raise or is that old? Okay, thank you. All right, I appreciate it, Deputy Director Lance. Let's move on to question number 6. Can you discuss the amount of the city's unfunded pension liability? Is the city on target of meeting the annual required contribution, which is now referred to as the actually actual reality determine employer contribution. Essentially, for those folks at home, these are the regulatory provisions which guide how much we actually have to put into our contribution on a year-over-year basis. But I'm not the treasurer, so if you could calculate, Treasurer Sims, what that means.
Indeed. Yes, I'm without going into, trust me, actuarial services are a pretty unique discipline for those who do know, but I'll do my very best to really break it down in layman's terms. The short answer to the question, Mr. Chair, is that yes, the city has set a goal to be fully funded by 2029, and we've consistently made the full ADC or ARC required contribution. Consider that, think of it like a mortgage payment, right? This is the city's contribution towards making sure that we're able to meet our long-term funded obligations that we have incurred related to the pension. And so this is the way the city makes good on its promises to our pensioners, essentially, along with other aspects that come into the pension, such as pensioner contributions, or for that matter, any returns on investments as well. So all three of those are what make up contribute towards meeting those long-term obligations. You'll see some quick stats in those bullet points. Again, I wanted to give you the high-level overview. What I was able to do with working with some of one of our advisors, pension advisor, was to get a bit of a window, a little peek, if you will, into the 12/31/2020 projected and expected numbers. However, a very important point at the very bottom of this slide, you'll see that the actuarial valuation reports for period ending June 30, 2020 are still being finalized. So you may, and why is that important? We may see some fluctuation in some of these numbers. That's just the nature of actuarial valuations. They tend to shift related to how many people are receiving pensions. Unfortunately, mortality rates are an aspect of actuarial services as well. So there may be some fluctuation. So what we often see is this retro reporting, if you will. So that's why as of June 30th, 2020, we're still working with them to finalize those reports. And when those are available, and also note they're performed every 2 years as well with respect to that. So just as a point of information, I thought that was important. But generally speaking, the answer to this question is yes, we've been making our contributions, and we are on target currently for 2029.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much, Treasurer.
Yep.
Let's move on to question number 7. Can you discuss the safeguards in place to protect the city's investments?
Actually, if we move on to the next slide, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
there was a through C on that question. I just want to highlight for everyone's edification in the public and on the committee here, these charts at your leisure. Please take a look at them. I won't read through them, but they do answer the stated question, specifying the amount of the actuarial required contribution funded over the last 3 years. You'll see that broken down in the chart. If we go to the next slide, which answers question 6B, and how does the city compare to the county and state with respect to those unfunded pension liabilities? Typically, it's not an exercise that we'll perform, but I did request that from our advisors, and you see the responses there. One of the reasons, really the primary reason why it's an exercise we don't perform on a regular basis is because the programs, the pension plans are really actually very, very different. And so, you always want to compare apples to apples, right? If we're going to make sure that we're going to do some type of real cost, or for that matter, performance comparison. So you'll see several bullet points there that explain why this is not a typical exercise. Nevertheless, we do answer the question. And then it's the next slide, we'll go into 6C, which actually specifies as a chart that breaks down the pension plans and of course the people in each plan. All right.
Okay, thank you very much, Treasurer.
My pleasure, sir.
And now let's move to the overall investment strategy.
Yes.
The office's vision for investment strategy.
Indeed.
What is it in a nutshell?
Yep, in a nutshell. So safeguards are currently in place. And of course, as I mentioned at the outset with priorities, we're actually going to look to enhance those any way we can. But in general, it's a multi-pronged approach. One that obviously mentions our conservative and low risk investment policy, which is just generally across the board. Why? and this is for both primary government cash deposits and our pension investments. That's our approach. The goal there is to protect our long-term financial interests, of course, but at the same time, we still wish to try and maximize the highest yield opportunities available relative to the economic environment and, of course, the risk profile that we talk about. What does that mean in layman's terms? We want to just remain conservative as possible because, of course, our goal is to be good stewards, great and sound stewards of the city's money, of the residents of the city, and of course, our pensioners. But at the same time, we want to make sure we're nimble enough and flexible enough to take advantage of opportunities that yield the highest returns possible given that strategy. And that's really our approach consistently. You'll see as well as we begin to try to work with consultants to modernize, as I mentioned, this department around investment policies and what have you. We'll continue to leverage this approach as we look to modernize the department around investments as well.
Okay, Councilmember Oliver, do you have a question?
Yes, yeah, I just wanted to get this out. I don't think we hit on it, but I just wanted to mention it because reading through the treasurer's report, I see the self-insurance cost is increased over 250,000. I mean, for the last 2 years, is that something that we should plan for in the future? It's just going to automatically be increased. I mean, it's going to stay there.
I'm happy to take that question. That the funding policy around funding our OPEB, our other post-employment benefits, is something that will be a part of the comprehensive evaluation of policies and procedures that our treasurer has spoken about. And so as we look at investment policy and investment strategy, as well as operations of the office, we're also looking to make sure that we are continuing to do what is right and prudent on behalf of the city of Wilmington and its citizens around funding our pension, various aspects of our pension programs. So at this time, that continues to be the investment policy around OPEB. However, at the conclusion of the analysis and evaluation that we look to do, that may alter or may not.
Okay, so to answer that question is that it may increase.
Currently, yes.
It may increase or decrease.
That's correct. At this time, we expect it to remain static. However, through the advisement of our advisors, as we assess the operations, it may change.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So I believe question number 8 is next. Can you discuss?
There was one last slide, I believe, with question 7.
7? Oh, there was no, okay.
Oh, maybe 1 or 2. We spoke of, it should be with additional safeguards, maybe the previous slide, the previous 2 slides. And we'll start there. And so, you know, these were multi-pronged questions, Mr. Chair. So we wanted to make sure, I won't read the entire slide, I promise. But I do want to make sure that we know that the questions were answered. You'll see here on this slide back to around safeguards. So in particular, with respect to cash deposits, those are the 4 pillars that I really try to make sure that we take into consideration. We have a due diligence framework as well that we work through that's centered around, of course, relationships. We take into account statutory and regulatory issues. So that's a due diligence framework in every decision we make, but specific to cash deposits, this is really these are the 4 pillars that we try to make sure are in place around before we make any decision. And then of course, there's additional work that we do through our partners and our pension advisors around weekly balancing of portfolios, independent portfolio oversight, quarterly fee reviews, et cetera. Again, this is all to the point of the question around safeguards that are in place to make sure that we have a good governance and compliance framework. So we can go to the next slide, sir. There's the Section A question. Subsection A was a question around the health of the city's pension funds. You'll see them here. This is the city's pension, and as Deputy Treasurer Lance was speaking of OPEB, which is other employment benefits, pension and employment benefits. So there's some data here. I think the important and salient point to remember is that the plans are performing very well, and the gains that we're seeing are pure investment gains, and performance. They're not they do not include the contributions by the city. So the short story there is that the plans are performing very well. We can move to subsection B. Around diversification and city's investment and risk tolerance. You'll see there, well diversified. We trade in a number of, invest, I should say, in a number of publicly traded U.S. equities, non-U.S. equities, fixed incomes. The pension plans has 3 unique investment strategies, and the OPEB funds are invested in 3 low-cost index funds. So again, keeping costs low, maximizing the potential yield opportunities as they present themselves. And these are also, I didn't put it here, but it's also important to note for those who are aware of, investing vernacular, we're really talking about like a lot of these investments, particularly the pension side, are passive investments. So they keep the index funds, et cetera, and they keep our fees lower because they're passively managed as opposed to actively managed, which would drive up the investment manager fees. We can go to the next slide. You'll see here's just a slide that kind of lays out the pension asset allocation versus our target and policy ranges. It's just a chart to show you those areas of investment that I just mentioned in the previous slide, what we were doing as of 12/30/2020, what the policy states where we should be in the policy range. So again, just more information from a transparency perspective. I believe there's a question from Councilman Spadola.
Yes, there is. Yes. Councilmember Spadola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mr. Treasurer. When you say the policy of the Treasurer's Office, the city, the police policy?
Yeah, great question. And it's actually a combination. So we do have in city charter, you'll see that there's a certain language throughout the city charter that speaks to how we choose to invest. And then there's also treasury policy as well. And that's part of what I was referring to at the outset during priority section, really taking a look at that treasury policy, because as you're familiar, I'm sure, when you start talking about opportunity costs, there have been a lot of changes in the market over the last, let's just say even last 5 to 10 years. The market has performed very, very well. We want to make sure, while we still maintain a conservative, low-risk posture, we want to make sure that we are still taking advantage of any other opportunities within statutory, regulatory, and relationship guidelines framework, due diligence framework. We want to make sure that we're capitalizing on any potential lost opportunities as well. And that's really the policy we're referring to, a combination of statute and in Treasurer's policy.
Thank you.
Hey, Renee, I'm going to walk. Okay. I'll be right back.
You
I'm not going to go far.
mute your phone line. Thank you. Okay. COVID-19, are you able to intervene?
Yeah, we're trying to locate that, Mike.
Yeah.
Right,
put him on the grass. Put him up on the deck.
You gotta have a mic.
Yeah. Thank you.
is there any follow-up, Councilmember Spadola? Is that?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
All right. Treasurer Sims, the ball is back in your court.
Excellent, thank you. So again, here in subsection question 7B, same thing, just another chart, really just laying out, the previous section looked at the pension plan. This is the actual OPEB allocation, but the chart remains the same. It's where we invest in those 3 low-cost index type funds, the policy and the policy range. Of course, and I mentioned this here initially, but I'll highlight it. It's at the bottom of the slide. Both pension plans are managed with long-term targets in mind. So as you might imagine, with any investment that's a long-term investment, it's really about persistence and consistency and staying the course in the investment policy and its strategy and execution. And those have proven very well historically for us over time, and we'll continue that methodology while still trying to capitalize on any potential new opportunities. All right, I'll yield to Deputy Treasurer Lance for the next 2 questions. Actually for question 8, I'll tackle question 9, and then Deputy Treasurer Lance will tackle question 10.
Okay, so Deputy Treasurer, question 8 is pertaining, just to remind you, is pertaining to the debt service. Can you talk about the debt service across all cities?
That's a previous slide, please.
That's correct. Thank you. So the total debt service budgeted for FY22 across all funds, you can see there in the first yellow highlighted number is 22 million, just shy of $22.5 million. The legal limit of 17.5% of the city's budget is 30.1 million, which you see below there. And the 22 million, of course, is beneath the 30 million. And again, the 22.5 million is comprised of three components. That's the general fund debt service, as well as the water sewer fund debt service, and then our motor vehicle fund debt service. All of these are basically repayments of funds borrowed in order to execute capital projects all across the city. The general fund debt service, 15.5 million, is the piece that is specifically required to be under the legal limit of the 17.5%. And you can see here that the 9.01% does represent that we are well beneath that 30 million figure.
Okay. Now moving to question 9, this is pertaining to the amount of cash on hand. Where is cash on hand now, and where was it the same time last year?
And what we've done here, Mr. Chair, is just drop in essentially another chart that captures the information you need to know year over year, essentially, right? 2020 to 2021. The report from April, just so you're aware, this actually will also be consistent with what you see on your treasurer's report, which we send to council on a bi-weekly basis. And so what the report from April 20th was April 2nd, 2020, and this report was April 1st, 2021. And so you'll see there unrestricted and restricted. Just to orient everyone on the chart, unrestricted cash is your traditional operating cash on hand, highly liquid, sitting in was formerly a certificate of deposit. But if you'll see in reference the treasurer's report from the most recent treasurer's report from April 1st, you'll see that those are actually, we made a move to move those to high interest yield checking accounts with one of our financial institution partners. And that has yielded the city an additional 12 basis points per day on all of our money. And so in an environment that's a particularly low yield, CD environment, an additional 12 basis points on every dollar, and we're talking millions of dollars, right? Every day, that can prove quite a smart move for us down the line. So we'll continue to monitor that. We'll continue to monitor CD environment as well. But right now, we determined that was the best and appropriate use of our funds. And that's a prime example, I should note, of exactly what we're talking about when we alluded to taking an approach, full assessment of operations really in these first 100 days. What are we doing? Yes, it's been low risk. But are there opportunities here? Because the environment is very dynamic, right? And so we have to be paying very close attention to that to make sure that we're capitalizing on any opportunities while still maintaining that cash, 4 pillars of cash investment that I spoke about a few slides ago.
Now,
restricted. I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
Something that popped out at me is just, I guess, the liquidity position obviously has changed dynamically in the past year. I mean, we have there's just to make it easy, there's more cash on hand. So is that the size of government growing, or is that we've now starting to get returns and now we're reinvesting it back in the market? Because it just seems, with unrestricted, there's about $25 million more on hand than we had last year. And restricted, there's about 20 million more that we have on hand this year versus last year.
That's right.
Were we just low on cash last year, or like what's the difference?
Our investment, that's a great question. And our investment strategies, as I mentioned, have proven successful, which is why we don't want to, the market has performed very, very well, right? And CDs for a while were actually yielding much higher returns than they have been in the recent past. So I think that's as far as the unrestricted cash is concerned, that's a very important point to note. With respect to restricted cash, that's what we're talking about there is that's cash in our account, but for specific purposes. For example, those may be bond proceeds. Likely, it's driven by bond proceeds. And in fact, the approximately $20 million change 2020 to 2021, a good portion of that can be attributed to the most recent bond activity that closed late last year, early this year. So you'll see this position move as we should expect. The better we do in the market, of course, we have more receipts, and receivables that come in as well. And our goal is to continue to invest wisely and be prudent and be sound stewards. And hopefully we'll continue to see these numbers grow. That's the goal. Underneath the pension funds, that unrestricted money, that's really more so a timing thing. And I think, you see it's an anomaly, 154% increase variant. Those unrestricted funds really represent the pension payroll accounts. So what you don't see here, and what we could have asterisked for you, but what you don't see here is that we actually had a pension payroll just several days after that April 1st cash treasurer's report. And so the number went down. So the point is, you'll see a lot of fluctuation at any given time, depending upon, what money needs to go out to pensioners.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clearing that up. All right.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we can move to question number 10. Can you discuss the planned use of the $1.5 million budgeted in professional services across general and pension funds?
Indeed, these are broken out over several slides, and of course, most of you on this call know that between myself and obviously Deputy Treasurer Lance, we've got some budget experience, and he more than I. But I wanted to make sure, as I always highlight, this is a team affair, and so you'll see Deputy Treasurer Lance will speak to a couple of these slides here. But of course, I'm here to address any additional questions as well.
Okay. All right. Now let's move to the,
So yeah, if we could start here at this slide, that'd be great.
Yes, please.
So the 1.1 million that's budgeted in professional services is across both the general fund as well as the pension funds. And you'll see that in FY22, we have 51.5 budgeted, up from the 15,000 that was budgeted last year. And this is really where the work of assessing the department's operations, Treasurer Sims already spoke to the departmental priorities around governance, modernization, efficiency, and outreach, and how we will be conducting an overall assessment of our operations, and in conjunction with internal as well as external partners, making sure that the operations of the office are in line with modern practices, so that the city, as well as so that the city treasury, the city government as an establishment, and then the city community as a whole are taking the best advantage of the current environment, both financially, economically, and regulatorily speaking. So that really addresses the increase in the consultants line. The decrease actually in pension funds and the consultants line in the pension funds reflects that the coming year will not be an evaluation year for the pension fund. So that cost that's typically associated with that expense will not be incurred in this particular year. Treasurer Sims, did you have anything to add to this particular slide?
Yes, I want to really highlight very quickly the consultants line increase. We don't want to shy away from that, and I want to be really clear about what this budget represents. If you go back to, we don't need to do this now, but as you take back in your leisure and you look at the original slide about combined funds presented by Mr. Hayford, you'll see that our MS&E, which is really what we line items we really have most control over, we actually came in $50,000 under budget year over year. And I want to highlight that. What you see is a repositioning, reallocation of budget line items and funds that were used in other budget line items to reinvest back into this office. I cannot stress that enough. That is our goal. That is the way that we are going to deliver measurables on our priorities that were stated in the earlier slides. So with respect to MS&E, not only were we not flat, we came in under budget, but it's very important that what we're doing is that this increase to consultants line reflects a reinvestment back into the city, back into this office, which is back into the citizens, to make sure that we're, have a modern 21st century, operation here. And so that's very important to us. We believe that's important to the city and making sure that we're actually able to execute on all the opportunities available to us over the next 4 years. This is a foundational year, is the point. And that's all. I just wanted to really highlight that for everyone's edification. And Deputy Lance, please go right back to your presentation.
Thank you, Treasurer Sims. If we can move to the next slide, please. The next component of the professional services budget for the office this coming year includes accounting fees, and the $16,800 there is flat over our previous budget. And these funds are amounts associated with pension administration activities and support specifically to our retirees and our legacy police and fire plan. So there's a position of pension secretary that incurs expenses to conduct that business. And this is where we budget for those expenses. Moving to the next slide, we have trustee fees. So in the general fund, we see a $3,000 decrease in trustee fees. These are the fees that are paid to our banking partners to manage the various accounts. You know, when we go to the capital market and borrow funds, and those proceeds are held in separate accounts, the fees associated with those accounts are budgeted here. In the pension funds, you'll see a flat budget over last year, and these are the fees that are associated with our pension investment advisor as well as our pension actuary. And the next slide.
Deputy Treasurer Lance, is legal or are legal fees pertaining to going to the bond market, is that included in that account line?
I can tell you, I'm happy to answer that. Traditionally, Mr. Chair, the legal fees will be oftentimes wrapped up into bond proceeds, and so that's helpful for several reasons. One of which is, you might imagine, is we have an opportunity to not have to come out of pocket, right, for legal fees for the transaction, which oftentimes legal fees can be, a little quite expensive. And if we haven't budgeted for those out of the gate, then it could be a big hit, one-time hit to the budget, especially since we're doing this in advance, right? So we're budgeting out, looking forward. If we go to the market, it's commonplace, quite candidly, that they'll be wrapped up into the closing. The closing fees are wrapped up into the actual to the borrowing activity. I think that's generally what we'll oftentimes see. But in this case, what Deputy Treasurer Lance was looking at is actually those ongoing fees that we see from trustees and from trust services, or for that matter, from the pension managers and the pension fund managers, et cetera. We'll see that in this column that we just reviewed.
And as a follow-up to the Treasurer, this goes to a theme we hit with the mayor's office and other departments. What's the amount of DBEs that are actually engaged in this process? So I know, it's a very, non-minority industry. So, what efforts is your office making so that the trustees and even the law firms involved in this bond work are as diverse as possible?
That's a great question. We're looking at it, a number of things. You'll see actually in the slides to come, I think 2 slides from here, we do speak to DBE participation from a pension and investment manager perspective. And so that's one angle. Part 2 to your question, and Deputy Treasurer Lance will touch on that and elaborate. Let me just be clear and really fully transparent. Many of you on this call now know me from my work previously in the Office of Economic Development with a focus on small and minority business. I plan on bringing that same approach to the Treasurer's office over the next 4 years. I'm just going to be blunt. We've already started conversations down that road. And so the numbers that you'll see in a few moments, I stand behind those numbers. I'm very proud of those numbers. I've also inherited those numbers. And so at the same time, my goal is over the next 4 years to increase those numbers. And I'm just going to be straightforward about that. It's going to be intentional. We're looking at diversification, not just of assets and investment strategy, but in people and personnel and companies we hire. All right, it's a focus of ours. Secondarily, though, you also talked about on the debt side, same goes there. So these are conversations we're having as we do these assessments that we spoke about at the outset. That's part of our matrix.
Thank you.
My pleasure, sir.
Since we are on that topic, if you would, if you don't mind, I'd like to advance the slide, and so we can just conclude that point with some additional data points. I'm sorry, back one more slide. Okay, so this is where we provide the information, as Treasurer Sims spoke about, DBE and minority business participation with regard to our pension program. So there are 2 DBEs currently with whom the City of Wilmington invests its pension funds. And we've been operating with one of those DBEs since 2000 and another one since 2010. And together, these two DBE fund managers represent 18% of our total fund managers, the number of fund managers that the city is working with. But as a percentage total of assets, the City of Wilmington is currently investing 20.2% of its pension funds with DBE owned and operated investment fund managers. Again, as Treasurer Sims mentioned, this is a number that we're proud of. It is a number that we inherited, and given both of our histories working in smaller minority business in the Office of Economic Development, this is something that we are looking to double down on, and it's a conversation that we are currently engaged with in with our pension advisor, pension investment advisors, and we are looking to see that number grow. Again, 2 pension managers that we're investing our funds with, our pension funds with, one of which is a 95% woman-owned business, and another one is a 60% African-American owned business.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to just back up one slide so that just to conclude the professional services discussion. So the final point concerning the $1.1 million budgeted in professional services is the $3,000 budgeted in temp agencies in the general fund. We've already alluded to the fact that there's a vacancy in the office, and so we wanted to have access to some funds in the case that we needed some additional administrative support while we were assessing the operations of the office. And then the temp agencies and the pension funds are down. I think this is an error in the slide. There should be 0 this year as opposed to 15,000 previously.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
And if you don't mind advancing forward 2 slides. And so finally, specify the frequency for that these financial advisors are reviewed. All of these relationships are governed by annual contracts, and so annually these our relationships are reviewed as well as the contracts are reviewed.
And just to highlight a little bit more on that, these annual contract reviews, what we're trying to present to you all tonight is really a larger picture of the assessment, the initial rounds of assessment that myself and the leadership here, Deputy Treasurer Lance, are performing. We need to have obviously funds to liaise once those are set, those assessments are done with our partners, and then really to do a much deeper dive. Annual contract reviews are going to be a part of that deeper dive as well, and that's how it ties back to DBE and really overall fee management and performance management with respect to returns, right? So they're all interwoven. The point here is to show how they are interwoven and how this budget, even $50,000 less than the MS&E section year over year, has been reprioritized to invest back into this office to of course, be able to deliver on those key priorities we mentioned at the outset.
Thank you.
And then the next slide, the final slide on the 1.1 budgeted and professional service. And I want to apologize, I misspoke about the 15,000 and the pension funds. Those trustee fees in the pension funds are actually associated with fees that are paid to our fund managers for managing the funds that we have invested. And the question here speaks to whether the fees that the city of Wilmington is paying are comparable to cities similar in size and investments. And we just wanted to make the point that there are a number of factors that contribute to the dollar amount for pension fee, investment fees that are trustee fees that are paid out, some of which include the number of accounts that are managed, the number of assets that are under management, and then the rates charged by investment fund managers. And all of these will vary from city to city based upon the structure and the health, as well as the structure of their pension fund. So for instance, the city of Wilmington may pay higher trustee fees because it's doing a better job of fully funding its program. In another case, our trustee fees may be lower because we are dealing with legacy plans that are closed, that are not taking on new contributors. So as a general statement, there are multiple factors that contribute to this. However, as a part of the overall assessment of operations, as well as our various policies within the office, we are taking a look at the competitiveness of the fund manager fees that the city of Wilmington pays to make sure that they are fair and reasonable and are not exorbitant.
All right.
Excellent.
And I believe last but not least,
Yes.
Treasurer Sims is just your overall organizational chart.
That's right. You can just go to the next slide, Mr. Chair. It's really just a highlight of how we're structured in the office. I'll leave this here and just take the opportunity to.
It's very small, but weighty team, right?
Listen, efficiency, right? I mean, this is we as you can see from the Treasurer's report, we have approximately just shy of $500 million on the Treasury management on behalf of the city. I'm proud to say that that's the case, and we're looking to grow that number on behalf of the citizens over the next 4 years. So, but that said, I want to just thank you for your time. I think there may be a question or two, and I'm happy to answer if that's the case.
Vice Chair Harley has a question.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Y'all did a great job. Treasurer Sims, you and your
team. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Yes, you did. Now, I know I've seen Henry Sapinski's name floating around somewhere previously in another meeting. Is he a part of your organization?
Not at this time, no, ma'am. But as you all know, former Treasurer Sapinski was here for quite some time and laid great framework and foundation for a lot of the work that we're doing now.
Oh, okay. So was he like a consultant for a while or contractor?
No, not in a formal capacity. As you might imagine, coming into the role, literally prior to taking over the seat in January, I spoke with numerous folks, and just to get some context about the office, as I mentioned, in terms of priorities in the first 100 days, right, was about understanding the office, taking control of the office operations because the wheels are still in motion.
Yes.
So we're literally jumping on the train as it's moving.
Realized that it was already an issue with everyone being home.
Yeah. So
he was part of that consultation team. Yes. But awesome. he was not on in a formal capacity.
Oh, okay. And like I said, the reason why I asked that question, because I was looking at your organizational chart. It doesn't have names there. And I think I've seen his name. It's that monthly meeting that we have. And the finance person is on that call. You're on that call. What's the name of that meeting once a month?
I believe you're referring to the Wilmington Economic Financial Advisory Council, WEFAC.
Yes, that's it. That's where I seen his name. Yes. So yeah, so that's good. Great. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Great job.
Yes, my pleasure.
Member Oliver, I believe you're up next.
Yes, I just want to echo with Councilman Harley. I was going to mention Henry's name, and I just want to congratulate the whole Treasurer's Department for doing an outstanding job.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
You know, all the hard work you do, and I'm just listening to your presentation and how I know some of the people, and I've met some of your people who work on your staff just in passing, and I'm glad, I was just glad that you were able to transition smoothly in that position. And I'm glad people like Henry and Alfred and your whole team has come together, and it just seems like you're doing an amazing job. And it's just a breath of fresh air. Not saying the previous person, you know, I'm just saying I'm just glad to see a lot of young, mature minority men in that position, in that office, doing such an amazing job with handling the budget the way y'all did tonight. And kudos to y'all.
Thank you, Councilwoman Oliver. I appreciate that. You know, we've worked well together over the years in the Office of Economic Development, and you know, so by the way, we've got some sidebar, some good business happening over on the east side as well. As you know, some things developing here in the 4th District, but I'm sure that'll be spoken about in the Office of Economic Development's presentation. But some good work that was done, you know, over the last year or so is starting to bear fruit. And so we're happy about that. And I thank you for your time. We have a great staff here, right? It was a big part of the transition after the election results and all that other stuff ran its course. It's about getting to work and assessing staff, assessing operations, making prudent decisions, and then of course getting down to executing with the game plan. And so that's been our goal. We're going to continue, just like our investment strategy, to try to stay the course.
Kudos. And I see Mr. George, old veteran there, doing such a great job in keeping y'all straight. And
yes, he is.
Y'all have
yes,
a
he
good
is.
Thank you.
All right. Just as a housekeeping matter, I would like now to actually give the public opportunity. If there's any comments from the public. All right, we'll going once, going twice. Now I just, again, would like to turn it back to Treasurer Sims and Deputy Treasurer Lance. I think we appreciate the very comprehensive presentation. And as the council will continue to review your budget, you know, we'll of course reach out other questions. Is there any closing words on your part, Treasurer Sims?
Just thank you very much for the opportunity to present. We hope that we were able to deliver on our mission for this evening around education and of course collaboration and showing the work that's been done, the thoughtfulness put into it, I hope. And of course, if there's any follow-up questions or concerns, comments, we're happy to address those as they come in as well. Feel free to reach out to us directly.
All right. Thank you very much, Treasurer Sims. All right. So
Cheers. Have a good evening.
Matter, again, we're running a little bit behind schedule, but we caught up sometime. I would like to take a City Council is scheduled next. This budget presentation. I would like to take a 5-minute recess, and we'll reconvene. It is 8:04 p.m. So we will reconvene at 8:09 p.m. and we'll have the last presentation for the evening. All right. Thank you.